Hello, this is Jim Schaefer, executive producer and host of Rip Rap, the academic book television program. My guest today is Randall Baier. We'll be discussing books that Rip Rap has received, including those on craftsmanship, George O'Keeffe and the Camera, Classic Chic, The Nobility of Spirit, and others. Welcome to Rip Rap, Randall.
Good to be here. Haven't been here for weeks.
The first book is The Craftsman by Richard Sennett, and he is professor of sociology at New York University and the London School of Economics. And before becoming a sociologist, he studied music professionally. What I found fascinating this, although it has the gender issue, which I find fascinating, is
Craftsman being craftswoman.
Right. And actually,
craftspeople, right?
Craftspeople. I struggled with actually when I was preparing the introduction.
Right.
And I was thinking, this is pretty difficult. Usually you can make gender neutral language.
Well, I heard someone in an interview yesterday, a woman, discussing issues about various wings of the Air Force, sections of the Air Force. And she said both men and women who are airmen, and it just came out naturally from her voice, about the men and women in these different services and how these issues affected all airmen. And so it seemed to be, whereas the word fisherman has now become fisher.
I haven't heard that one before.
That's one that comes out of the categories that the Library of Congress puts out for legitimate subject headings, and men and women actors call themselves actors now.
Right.
You don't hear actress so much now. So, I could see it gender neutral in a sense.
But I am fascinated with this whole notion. What he's talking about is the basic human impulse to do a job well for its own sake.
Yeah, nice.
And I just really like that. And all along with that is the way of life that goes with that. Now, he says that that's linked up with industrial society.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure that it is. I think there is a level of craftsmanship, perhaps, but I think that, and what he's looking at is how the values extend the realm of this concept into all the professions, computer programmer, doctor, parent, teacher, citizen. And I think that was something that I thought, and it's the way I teach my writing classes. I tell them what I'm trying to show you is the craft of writing for competent, lifelong skills. Not just getting enough to get by, but to really take a look at this. And he looks across time and space. It's this wonderful thing of what were involved with Roman brick makers, Renaissance goldsmiths, printing presses in Enlightened Paris, the factories of industrial London. What are the issues that divide practice and theory, technique and expression, craftsman and artist, maker and user? And I think that's what I thought was really lovely.
Well, I think a lot of artists will say that many artists are known as craftsmen, not just in the Norman Rockwell sense of creating a sort of a detailed specific image, or in that really fine sense of detail that sort of is imitative, but just the skill with your tools that is so competent that you don't think in that sense of knowing, what do I do next? What do I do next? It's fluid, the kind of fluidity. So I seem to think that
he has this
sense
concept
of craft
of what
is
he
like
calls
that.
Material consciousness.
I was reading the opening of this chapter. It's interesting that you picked that one.
Yeah, well, because it's so central to what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And that's also in line
quote.
with sense experience. To anybody who's doing something well, they know how it feels to do it well.
Yeah, right.
And my example for that is the Zen Buddhist way of learning how to shoot a bow. The first thing is how to pick it up.
Mm-hmm.
And you get down to the point where you're picking up in the best way, and then just drawing the string, and then after you do that, then add in the arrow before you even shoot it. And I think that is something that's really helpful in looking at the craftsman, is someone who really does know. And part of it says, you know, that to me, what is key is that he says this is concept is causes philosophers to salivate, is our consciousness of things independent of the things themselves. I don't think it's independent, but I think it is something beyond the realm of the immediate thing.
Say that again. Do the thing is the question? Do things have consciousness?
No, is our consciousness of things independent of the things themselves?
Oh, well, you know, that's a philosophical issue, so there's a yes and a no. But I would, or maybe a continuum of opinion, but I would say there is. I would myself.
I think there's an extension.
Our consciousness
it depends
of what?
on the material, but there's another realm or another dimension.
Right.
And he's raised this thing that the craftsman's proper conscious domain is that all of his or her efforts to do good quality work depend on curiosity about the material at hand.
Mm-hmm.
What a wonderful
It's very
thought.
true. The example is quite visceral, if I can use that, because it's a pun.
Right.
He's talking about going to a medical convention and
Right.
coming in as an interested observer. There was a large meeting, and one of the images is left of the meeting, and it was clearly something on surgery or something that had to do with the intestines, because there's a leftover image of a doctor's hand with a rubber glove holding the intestine during an operation.
Yeah.
And he says many of the journalists were just turning away in disgust, but every doctor and nurse at this convention, surgical nurse and surgeons presumably, were rapt attention on that image.
That's right.
As if they were saying, at what point in what kind of operation was this going on, and it's almost as if that is part of the sense of the material that a real craftsman, craftspeople, whatever.
And also our
whoever
interest in
have.
technology comes into play here, because he talks about originally the way you made a pot is you coiled a rope of clay up around the edge of a flat disc. And then came the idea of having the rotating wheel.
Disc spin, yeah.
But before that, that's how you constructed
Right, basic
the pot.
terracotta construction.
And you had to concentrate on that material and what it needed, along with your concept of what the end product would be. And then as technology evolves, you're able to do it more quickly, but it still required you to know. Because have you ever done, I've not done pottery, but I've watched people work on it. All it takes is one little inadvertent movement.
Absolutely.
And it flops over.
Right,
Yeah.
and it has to do with texture, things you feel. I mean, the hand is such a wonderful image on the cover of this book, the photograph of the hand, because it really has to do with so much sensual knowledge of the material, the weight, especially when you're talking something made out of clay.
Right.
The moisture level, the graininess, the substance, the very stuff that you're building with. And I mean, anybody who works with wood or even cooks is very similar, and I'm sure it goes to surgery. I mean, we're at a level of life and death, but any craftsperson will look at material. You can see it. A carpenter, a cabinet maker, a chef. I include chefs in that. You're very right. I mean, they have an intimate knowledge of what their material will do.
See, and then he takes it one step further, which is another key concept, is metamorphosis.
Mm-hmm.
So you have an awareness of the material. You also have awareness of how to change
But
that
then what happens? Yeah.
into something else. And I just thought that's really wonderful, just to reflect on that being aware of that process of change by knowing the material and how you can affect it to do certain things. And you have to be very specific. This isn't guesswork at all. This is there may be inadvertent things that could be interpreted later as creativity, but there's very, very specific of how all this works. And
Jewelry people, jewelers is another good example, especially when you mention technology, the alchemical aspect of jewelry making today with heat and different types of metals and stone is such a, it really requires a long apprenticeship to really know what that transformation will do and what the outcome will be. And ceramics, all these things
another
fall
thing he
into play.
brings into it, which I just love, is he brings in theory from the Greek theoria, meaning, or theatron, which is the place for seeing. And so it's not only having material consciousness in it, but it's actually seeing, in other words, viewing it, projecting what is going on and how to affect it. And so I just thought this is really, and then he talks about the craftsman being engaged in a continual dialogue with materials. So it's this constant process of seeing the material for what it is, trying to make work for change, and then being aware of it, this response back and forth. And I thought, wow, I love that. And I wish that all of our young people were engaged into what they're doing in that way, that they become involved with the material, they see how it changes, and they keep up this continuous
Well,
aspect of it.
I think in some ways, a lot of the opportunity for craft consciousness, if you want to put it that way, is available to the young today. If you take something as simple as a computer that allows you to create your own videos, or picture software, or even some field of study that you're doing, that you're interested in, say games or languages or something like that. It takes time depth with a material to build that sense of craft. But if you have kind of a fascination with it, or you just keep doing it over and over again, it becomes, I don't know if second nature is the right word, but you become a craft. It becomes part of your craft. You're skilled with the material. So even delving into something as ethereal, non-textile, tactile as software, manipulating photographs on a screen, can actually have the same kind of intent. I believe that anyway.
Well, another thing that I love is he talks about the hand, but this is the technique. Or he quotes Immanuel Kant, who once remarked, the hand is the window onto the mind.
Onto the mind.
Onto the mind. And in other words, this is the instrument. This is the doing of it, and how you have to be trained, or they say the intelligent hand.
Yeah.
You can't just kind of do it. You have to know what you're doing. And I thought, wow, this is some really wonderful stuff in terms of the craftsmanship. And then the whole thing about instructions. You need to be shown how to do it. You can't just start doing it. Someone needs to take the time.
When I was in the Netherlands, I went to a wonderful exhibit at the Van Gogh Museum called Van Gogh as Tekenaar, a technician or draftsman, actually, draftsperson. And it had hundreds of his illustrations of trees. He's well known for these very gnarly looking trees, lots of angles, but black and white illustrations, and all kinds of sketches of fields with the birds, like his sunflower fields with the crows or birds flying. But the craft aspect of his hand was remarkable, because it really showed how skilled he was at drafting. He was really a master draftsman, so to speak. In addition to all the artistic license or design or shape, from the angle of view to perspective to all the way he constructed a scene with focus and things in the distance and what was in the foreground and the background. But his sense of hand was really like any artist, great artist, I mean, they have their own identity and their own remarkability, quality.
Well, there's another thing I was reflecting on and ran across there about instruction, and that is the struggle to use language to depict physical action. And
Yeah,
that's
well, now you're
crucial with
talking about the
craft.
craft of writing,
Yeah.
maybe.
Well, just overall, he's
Uh-huh.
talking about craft.
Uh-huh.
And you often will see someone and you ask them, well, how did you do that? And they can't articulate.
Oh, you mean in other words, the difficulty of translating how you did something
what you're doing.
into language.
Because if you're at the deeper level
Right,
of doing it,
right,
it's at a level that is sort of almost beyond language.
right.
And now
Yeah,
you've got to bring
it's
it,
interesting.
capture it back, so that other people can do
Yeah,
the same thing.
it's pretty deep philosophically as well.
Yeah.
I've seen, this is an issue with actors when they describe.
Or choreography, doing
yeah,
choreography
right.
of dance.
You can, I mean, it applies to
Yeah.
all aspects of things.
How did you do that? Well, I did it. Well, no, and to really understand
Right.
it. And so I found it really fascinating. And it's so important for other people to understand, well, what did happen.
Yeah.
But the other thing to understand is that even if you see it and you read it, you still have to do it to fully understand. And like I said earlier, with dance, they have annotation methods of trying to represent their choreography
Yeah.
of dance.
Yeah.
But that's not the same thing as seeing it
As
done.
seeing it done, or
And there's things that
creating.
they're incomplete in the language itself and trying to capture it. So I thought that was pretty interesting. I don't know. I just really thought this book was just wonderful. He talks about resistance, and improvising. When you're really at the peak of your skills, you can take it to another level.
Mhm.
This isn't arbitrary. This isn't casual. This isn't joking around. But you see things that you didn't see before.
That you wouldn't see unless you get to that certain point.
And that as you're working with it, and then the other thing he talks about is quality-driven work. And I think that's often what we forget, that it's excellence that we're seeing. And the beauty is when it all comes together and you use all those elements to do it. So I thought I really enjoyed looking at this book. You've got one in terms of craftsmanship.
Well, this is a fabulous book that just came out from Yale called Georgia O'Keeffe and the Camera, The Art of Identity. And you were pointing something out to me about the shape of the hands in her photographs in here.
Yeah.
But this goes through the history of I guess the O'Keeffe
Legacy.
iconic identity legacy is a good way to put it.
But the
of
thing
so
about
much-
the identity is crucial. And this book underscores that element. She very carefully crafted her representation
Yeah.
of herself and of her art. And you don't really realize, because you'll see different things and say, well, that's pretty interesting. But this book really shows it, and it also traces out, in terms of her involvement with camera and Stieglitz and
Yes,
stuff like
yeah,
that.
Yeah.
But she really was very specific and very precise about how that happened. And it's a wonderful book. I mean, Yale has been turning out these absolutely stunning books, and we were talking about why did she end up in, what was it, New Mexico? With this stark desert. But I think it was very stark. It is because it's so stark.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And also just the way she could sort of transform that space into something that was, I call it iconic, but as you say, she worked very purposely to get, the images that she did. There is a lot of photography in here, especially of her hands, by other people as well, not self-photography. And it really does capture sort of her personal relationship with her material, speaking of craftsmen, but also with the space of her world. And what New Mexico, is to her.
And both in term, and so it's very appropriate that we've been talking about the craftsman, because
Yeah.
when you take a look at it, you see an obvious aesthetic that's very carefully done, you know, and it's really a fascinating book.
Very nice book, beautifully produced. As you say, Yale's been putting out a series of, especially a lot on American artists that have come across. This is really special.
Oh, we have to have one economic heavy-duty deal. So we got the bridge at the end of the world. I mean, if we're going to talk about end things, why not go for the big one?
Right.
The bridge at the end of the world, capitalism, the environment, and crossing from crisis to sustainability. And the author is James Gustav Spaeth.
With hope. Hopefully we can make the bridge.
Yeah. He's saying, my point of departure in this book is the monumentous environmental challenge we face. But today's environmental realities link powerfully with other realities, including growing social inequality and neglect, and the erosion of democratic governance and popular control. We got to do some balance here, But this is one of those warning things that will, The guy, though, is a respected scholar. He's founded environmental institutions over the past 4 decades. He's dean of the School of Forestry and Environmental Studies at Yale. He was awarded Japan's Blue Planet Prize for a lifetime of creative and visionary leadership.
Right.
So this is, a very interesting book because he's trying to deal with the market and making it work for environment. At the same time, we're looking at the root causes of what's going on with some of the disasters that we have and what caused them.
Mm-hmm.
To sum up, he says, we live in a world where economic growth is generally seen as both beneficial and necessary. The more, the better. Where past growth had brought us to a perilous state environmentally. Where we are poised for unprecedented increments in growth. Where this growth is proceeding with wildly wrong market signals, including prices that do not incorporate environmental costs or reflect the needs of future generations. I mean, we really don't have to go any farther than the price in the gas pump right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he says we've got to begin this work in earnest of trying to understand what he calls our ecological footprint.
I hope that writers such as he can have some policy impact. It sounds to some degree as he does, but so much of this is dependent on the world of policy, legislation. I mean, in our own country and certainly globally, we're trying to get relationships struck with countries across the world to try to do something in regard, and we have to get our own house in order as well.
He says we must all be out to save the world, literally.
Mm-hmm.
In our journey down the path between 2 worlds, we are fast approaching a place where the path forks. We've ignored the warnings to the point that as we now approach the fork ahead, we're perilously close to losing the most precious things of all. We're rapidly hollowing out nature, ourselves, and our society. Beyond the fork, down either path, is the end of the world as we have known it.
Well, how do you take this kind of sentiment and then convince other countries in the world who have so many severe problems related to energy, related to economic sustainability? I mean, you look at India, China, both of whom both countries have well over 1 billion people each, and like at our previous, riprap, we were talking about the one-child policy historically in China. I mean, this is an issue for me because these books seem to stay within academia, and as agreeable as I mean, it's poignant because here's somebody who could actually and has, I'm sure, have an impact. And I hope this kind of
Well,
sentiment
he's
does
pointing,
have an
he says,
impact.
can one see the beginnings of a true citizens movement in America?
Mhm.
Which is what I think he's calling for.
Mhm.
Perhaps like Charles Reich, I'm letting my hopes get the better of me, but I think we can.
Well, he needs to be involved in
Yeah.
policy, and I doubt if he would become a happy member of the present administration. But who knows in the future?
And he talks
But-
about Al Gore's and Inconvenient Truth and other
Mhm.
things like that,
Mhm.
the Energy Action Coalition. But what's interesting is he said, in the struggle that we're going through now, and then the crossing will follow, we're carried forward by hope, a radical hope that a better world is possible and that we can build it. And he quotes Anarundhati Roy, another world is not only possible, she's on her way. On a quiet day, I can hear her breathing. So I think
Right.
it will happen when we realize that the change is necessary.
That's a great invocation, because
Yeah.
I've heard Arundhati, I think it is, Roy, speak, and I've seen her in some movie video presentations that they've done as documentaries, and I've also heard her talk. And she is a real activist. I mean, she has stopped dams in India because it was totally displacing enormous numbers of people. So that's the kind of activity which it seems to be ever the rule. You know, a government or a power structure is constantly saying, for the betterment of us, the betterment of, in this case, they invoke the nation, we're moving, 100,000 people, because we need water, electricity, power to drive
Well, that was
cars,
this is in line
power,
with the discussion we
industry.
have with Larry Fry in his book on communication and activism.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
His position is that scholars need to take it beyond just being aware, but to intervene. On certain issues, that is because then we'll be able to situate theory and practice, or theory in practice. We'll be able to do something about what we're doing.
Right.
We have special knowledge based on what we know about something, then we also can do special action to realize the potential. But I thought that, it's a bit of a dramatic, it is a very dramatic title, but this is someone who's passionate and concerned about developing sustainability and shifting from what we're doing with the endless production
It's the shift
towards
we need to
something
do.
that's more ecologically sustainable.
It's very seductive for us to be captive in the sort of energy that we need. Yeah.
Well, we've completed another riprap.
Yes, with deep philosophy at the end and
That's right.
insights that transcend our
That's right.
mere local presence.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.